Ms. Teague,
Mock said.
you look like you've seen a ghost. Are you okay?
Brenda hoisted her daybag higher onto her shoulder and laid her hand on top of it, as if somehow this might better hide the rectangle-shaped package she was carrying. She could feel her face had gone pale.
I'm just worried about Glenn.
Mock cocked her head, eyeing her awkwardly. Brenda felt a sudden wariness that Mock's involvement tonight might relate to this small package that Glenn had entrusted to her. Glenn had warned Brenda, powerful people want to steal this. It would be dangerous in the wrong hands. Brenda couldn't imagine why the chief of police would want a little box containing a talisman or even what the talisman could be. Mock stepped closer, her black eyes probing.
I sense you've had a revelation.
Brenda felt her face go flush.
No, not exactly.
Then what's on your mind?
Brenda hesitated, having no idea what to say. She had no intention of revealing the existence of the package in her bag, and yet if Mock took her to the headquarters, her bag most certainly would be searched on the way in.
Actually,
She began, trying to change the subject.
I have another idea about the numbers on Glenn's note.
Mock's expression revealed nothing.
And what might that be?
She glanced over at Davison now, who was talking to the forensic team. Brenda swallowed hard and wondered what she could possibly come up with to tell them. You're a teacher, Brenda, she told herself. Make it up as you go along. She thought about the 7 tiny symbols, hoping for some sort of inspiration. Nothing. Blank. As Brenda's memory skimmed through her mental encyclopedia of symbols, she could find only one possible point to make. It was something that had occurred to her initially, but had seemed unlikely. At the moment, however, she had to buy time to think.
Well,
She finally began.
a symbologist's first clue that they're on the wrong track when deciphering symbols and codes is when they start interpreting symbols using multiple symbolic languages. For example, when I told you this text was Roman and Arabic, that was a poor analysis because I used multiple symbolic systems. The same is true for Roman and Runic.
Mock crossed her arms and arched her eyebrows as if to say, go on.
In general, communications are made in one language, not multiple languages, and so a symbologist's first job with any text is to find a single, consistent symbolic system that applies to the entire text.
And you see a single system now?
Well, yes. And no.
Brenda's experience with the rotational symmetry of ambigrams had taught her that symbols sometimes had meanings from multiple angles. In this case, she realized there was indeed a way to view all 7 symbols in a single language.
If we manipulated the notes slightly, the language will become consistent.
Eerily, the manipulation Brenda was about to perform was one that seemed to have been suggested by Glenn's captor already when he spoke the ancient Hermetic adage. As above, so below. Brenda felt a chill as she reached out and grasped the camera Davison was holding and flipping it over so that the symbols which were upside down were now right side up. The tiny symbols now instantly transformed themselves. It was the Roman number CCC, L, XIX, which means the number 369. The number 369 is often associated with enlightenment and spiritual awakening. Many ancient cultures believed that this number represented the divine principles of creation and the universe, and used it as a symbol of spiritual power and transformation. Then Brenda recognized the other letters SBB and the number 14. Brenda assumed the analysis would cause blank shrugs, but Davison's expression immediately changed.
SBB?
Detective Davison demanded. Mock turned toward Davison.
If I'm not mistaken, that sounds like a familiar numbering system here in the GICC.
Davison looked pale.
It is.
Mock gave a grim smile and nodded to Davison.
Davison, follow me. I'd like a word in private.
As Chief Mock led Detective Davison out of earshot, Brenda stood alone in bewilderment. What the hell is going on here? And what is SBB? Detective Davison wondered how this night could possibly get any stranger. The note said SBB 14. He was amazed any outsider had even heard of SBB, much less SBB-14. Glenn Moody's note was not directing them upward as it had appeared, but rather was pointing in quite the opposite direction. Chief Mock led Davison over to a quiet area on the other side of the room.
Detective, I trust you know exactly where SBB-14 is located?
Of course.
Do you know what's inside?
No, not without looking. I don't think it's been used in decades.
Well, you're going to open it up.
Davison did not appreciate being told what he would do so indiscriminately.
Ma'am, that may be problematic. I'll have to check the assignment roster first. As you know, most of the lower levels are private storages and security protocol regarding private.
You will unlock SBB-14 for me.
Davison stared at her a long moment and then pulled out his radio, raising it to his lips.
This is Davison. I need to unlock the SBB. Have someone meet me there in 5 minutes.
The voice that replied sounded confused. Detective, confirming you said SBB, it crackled through the small microphone.
Correct. SBB. Send someone immediately. And I'll need a flashlight.
He stowed his radio. Davison's heart was pounding as Mock stepped closer, lowering her voice even further.
Detective, time is short.
She whispered.
And I want you to get us down to SBB-14 as quickly as possible. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
I also need something else from you.
In addition to breaking and entering, Davison thought. He was in no position to protest, and yet it had not gone unnoticed by him that Mock had arrived and taken charge within minutes of Glenn's hand appearing, and that she now was using the situation to demand access to private sections of the GICC. She seemed so far ahead of the curve tonight that she was practically defining it. Mock motioned across the room toward Brenda.
The duffel bag on that lady's shoulder.
Davison glanced over.
What about it?
I assume it was X-rayed whenever she entered the building?
Of course. All bags are scanned.
I want to see that X-ray. I want to know what's in it.
Davison looked over at the bag Brenda had been carrying all evening.
Wouldn't it be easier just to ask her?
What part of my request was unclear, Detective?
Davison pulled out his radio again and called in her request. Mock gave Davison her email address and requested that his team email her a digital copy of the X-ray to her phone as soon as they had located it. Reluctantly, Davison complied. Forensics was now finishing up, and Mock ordered them to deliver it directly to another team in Dickinson. Davison was too tired to protest. He felt like he'd been run over by a steamroller tonight already.
And I want that ring.
Mock called over to Forensics. The chief technician seemed ready to question her but thought better of it. He removed the gold ring from Glenn's hand, placed it in a clear specimen bag, and gave it to Mock. She slipped it into her jacket pocket, and then turned to Brenda.
We're leaving. Bring your things.
Where are we going?
Just follow Detective Davison.
Yes, Davison thought, and follow me closely. The SBB was a section of the GICC that few ever visited or even knew existed. To reach it, they would pass through a sprawling labyrinth of tiny chambers and tight passages buried beneath the crypt. Once some teenage boys snuck down here and got lost, and a couple of them almost died. Davison was starting to suspect that if Mock had her way, Brenda might suffer a similar fate.